when you take history and the history of music, what do you get? You get like five composers a century or something, and there are hundreds. You know, it's just the way our I guess our karmic human production goes. You know, and it's not easy. It depends. I think on well, I don't think that your birth is by random accident, and I think that you bring a lot to it. You know, you bring a lot with you. What I've realized in the past several years is that even though you teach, you know, music technique and so on, it's and music theory is misnamed because it's not really theory at all. It's merely description of what other composers have done, and that what various theorists like to point out and try to figure out what makes it all work. Well, the truth is, no one knows what makes music work. Because if you knew what made music work, you would, and to be creative, you would just go through that, and then everyone would be creative. It's a total mystery. It's not like in science when you know how one thing, and even in science, of course, everyone points to that as a thing, but you know, science changes every minute. I mean, while we were talking, science has just shifted a little bit, you know, and something that we always took for granted as being right is no longer right there, you know. I mean, if you just go back 100 years, all of the scientific theories then are sort of, you know, out of date, you know. So everything is constantly changing. I wouldn't say progressing or whatever, but it's changing. And no one really knows what the hell is going on, really. You know what I mean? Everyone's trying to find out, and we maybe know more about certain things than we did before. My whole fascination with music technique is through Counterpoint, and I've read a lot about it, and I've taken a lot of classes when I was younger. And I'm still reading it. I'm still trying things. I was working on a fugue today, actually, you know, and there's no real consensus what a fugue really is. You know, it has a few things. And if you look at Bach is the greatest example because none of his fugues are the same, and there's no pattern that you can, you know, take from them, except there's an exposition, you know. And so creativity, I don't think you can teach creativity. You can set an example and fire someone else's creativity, maybe like Duke Ellington did for Gary McFarlane. But and it also depends on what you bring to your life when you're born. Counterpoint is actually a lesson in cooperation, and done at the highest level, and done poetically and beautifully, and there are no really set rules for it exactly, you know, because when you learn it, it's like you're learning what was written for an 18th century young person, or, you know, an aspiring composer. And life then was a lot different, you know. One of the big things missing in today's environment is an easy access to total solitude. You know, I mean, even in the 50s, you could leave someplace and go to your room, and, you know, you could actually not be hounded by anybody or even anything unless you turned a radio on or something. That's why I like living in Ithaca, New York, next to a state park and in a beautiful field, and I can go there every day and be alone and just meditate if I want to, or just take a hike and, you know, stuff like that. I think a really intelligent, creative person can still survive without, although everything, including all the software, is sort of pointing you in a certain direction, because they're pointing you in the direction that they think most people want, and most people want to just do stuff to make money and be a financial, commercial success, which is okay. But, you know, I just like to evolve on my own, at my own pace in my own little world, and I'm doing okay. Well, it's like when you would see in Keyboard magazine piano something about piano technique made easy, and it's never easy. And then I saw a book once called Meditation Made Easy, and I got really pissed. It's yeah, right. It's like it's everyone seems to want something that's easy and convenient. And the iPad certainly is, and I'm sure it's a lot of fun for a lot of people. But when you get in, if it just maybe that attitude encourages people to think that they're doing great things when they're really maybe only doing superficially great things, which is okay to do superficially great things, but it might lead to some kind of self deception about what it is you're doing. It depends on what any individual's ideal of success really is, So it's hard to argue that, why not give kids all these things and do an iPad? It's great. Maybe, and who knows, maybe that is the way. Maybe that's the seed where you go and you look into things more detailed at an earlier age than you would have otherwise, and then realize what you're into and want to get really better. And then as you grow into it, you get more and more into it, and then maybe you'll become a great master at it. Who knows? Academia and music is another complicated thing, and there are some great composers at these institutions, but most of them have, including the composers I studied with, had no idea about what jazz was, or any. I mean, just none. I mean, Gunther Schuller did. He was practically the only composer teacher I had who really understood all of that. I mean, he understood it really well. But I mean, I had a Pulitzer Prize composer come up to me one day and said, jazz is what? Jazz is like seventh chords, right? I mean, something has to change in that way, but I wouldn't get so nervous. Traditionalists always get nervous. If you read the introduction to Gradus ad Parnassum, which is the sort of Bible of counterpoint from like 1730, and Bach even recommended it, after a while. It's written by Johann Fuchs, who was the music master for several emperors in a row in Austria, and his same thing was, it's like composers think they know what they're doing, and the music I've seen lately by our younger composers, they have no idea of form or of counterpoint or anything. So I'm writing this book to set this record straight. So it's a constant kind of thing you hear probably every generation. I wouldn't get too worried about it. Well, maybe that's why there's a revival of vinyl, and the explanation was that they find that younger people, especially in their late teens, early 20s, are missing artifacts. They like having the artifacts that they can hold and look at. Well, people used to do that back in the 18th century also. Only it was like not as much in paper, and people didn't have income from recordings. So I don't think it's so bad. I never had a lot of income from recordings myself. Good that it's hard to get to because you have to really work at it. You have to really be fascinated by it. If creativity were just another thing, it would just another technique. It isn't a technique. It's a combination of everything you know from everything. I mean, it's like everything, as John Cage used to say, everything leads to everything else. It's the butterfly effect. It's crazy stuff. Creativity is a wonderful, great mystery. So, and it shouldn't be any other way. And And you get those people who teach creativity, you've got to be really very apprehensive about that, you know. I remember going to hear Miles Davis back in 1957 at the old Cafe Bohemia, you know, and Sonny Rollins was 26 years old, you know, and I was like 18. And I thought, these guys, and Red Garland was playing the piano. And then a few months later, he had his group with Coltrane, and I went to hear that, and I thought, that's what moved me. I had no idea how they were doing what they were doing, but that was creativity to me. I mean, it was like, and then you'd go hear Glenn Gould, and I thought, God, this is great. You know, it was like, no one plays Bach like that. You know, how do you do that? You know, and that really gets you if you know, and then you find your own way to get to whatever turns you on, and you keep, if you're serious about it, you just keep on going until you, it takes a long time. I mean, it takes some of us a long time. Most people who are not in the field, they just think it's something that's wonderful to be able to do, you know, and they have no idea that you busted your ass to get this far and gone through a lot of heavy. If you've ever had a private music teacher for years and years, you learn that they scream at you and yell at you, and you feel intimidated, and it's not like a great joy to go to a piano lesson all the time. You feel like really nervous and like almost sick sometimes, and especially when you have to go play in front of a whole jury of people or have your compositions judged by a whole bunch of people that you don't know. I mean, it's really, I remember when I was at Harvard and I played part of my thesis piece in class, and there was the Harvard Overseers Board was there, you know, 7 or 8 people, and then I found out later that one of the people in this board was Leroy Anderson. He said they shouldn't let people like that in Harvard. What was he doing there? But the faculty thought it was funny. I mean, they were telling me, you know, and I was thinking, oh my God, it made me very nervous. His definition of synergy, and when he was talking about synergy, no one was using that word. Hardly anyone knew that word back in the 60s even. It's the behavior of whole systems unpredicted by any of their parts taken separately. There is one exception to that synergy rule, and those are the canons that Bach wrote for the musical offering, which are riddle canons, which are one part. You only get one part, but it tells you what the whole is. So it's the opposite of synergy. So I thought, well, there's an interesting, you know, balance that can be had from, you know, you can ascertain various things if you do it correctly. And so it led me to write a whole series of pieces where I took one part from someone noted composer like Brahms or Mozart, and then added all of just my own parts, where it becomes a totally different piece, but it's also recognizable as Mozart in the same way because it's a prominent part from a Mozart piece. Well, of course, Bach would be fantastic, you know. But I think what I would like to hear Haydn working. Because Haydn doesn't come from a great musical dynasty like Bach. And Haydn learned a few lessons from Porpora. And he picked up a lot as being in the choir at St. Stephen's. And I would just like to hear him figure out stuff, because he had to figure out a whole bunch of things on his own. He was sort of a gopher. He was hired as a gopher and part writer copyist for the band at the Esterhazy Palace. And then the conductor of that band died within 2 years of him being there. So they just put him in charge temporarily, and he was so good. You know, I just, that whole thing fascinates me, how he did that. So I'd like to hear Haydn at work when he was like maybe 35 years old or so, you know, because Mozart, of course, could do all that stuff when he was 10, you know. So, you know, you're going to hear something great, you know, and you're going to hear something great from Bach, but to hear Haydn figure it out would be interesting to me. John Cage, Charles Ives, you know, the older guys before me. My peers, I am always continually impressed with Philip Glass. I don't mean by that that everything I think that he's composed is a masterpiece, but I am continually impressed because he's so productive and he's so lively, and with all the great success he's had, he's investing a lot of his own fortune into helping young composers in various ways, and he just seems to be a positive influence everywhere he goes, you know. And he's an old friend of mine, but I haven't seen him in almost 20 years. But we used to hang out a lot together in the 70s and 80s. And Steve Reich is another one whose his musical ideals are always first. You know, he doesn't sell out to anything. He doesn't act on crazy impulses. I don't think things are looking up for large orchestras. You know, I think that's going to dwindle a lot. I think that the whole social economic system that supported them is no longer there, and that's one of the European kind of things that started actually with our friend Joe Haydn, Franz Joseph. You know, that whole thing where the orchestra got really large and spun out of control under old Wagner, you know. And another thing seriously I think about is various music techniques that are taught in college have to be reformed greatly, you know, especially harmony and counterpoint. And counterpoint is not, it's taught like a parlor trick, you know, parlor game. You learn this and that, and they spend so much time trying to figure out the vertical aspects rather than the horizontal aspects. And the whole thing that keeps counterpoint alive is that each melody is interesting, that each melody that is played at the same time, they cooperate with each other in some way, you know, but they each remain their own individual things, and, you know, a lot unlike what Congress does, you know. So it's a very beautiful thing, you know. It can be, and it's not some little technique you take lightly and try to learn what the consonants and dissonances are and what this species is or that species is. So yeah, there should be a better way of teaching that. And instead of teaching just totally regular 18th century harmony and so on to beginning people, they should get Mark Levine's book on harmony, jazz piano book harmony, and it's much better. And it's much more relevant. Money, who wouldn't love to have a lot of money? But it's never motivated me to do music. It really hasn't. One of the few times where I was doing that, I was doing music for so-called industrial films way back in the 1970s, and they got me because they didn't have to hire a lot of musicians. They just hired me, and I did everything and imitated everything with synthesizers. And after a while, I just told the guy, I can't do this because just doing this, making money like this, just not working for me. And the guy gave me this double look, like, what the hell am I talking about? And, you know, I just haven't done it since then. I mean, I've just done what I felt was worthwhile to do.